Well, guys, today I'm going to be talking all about regrets. Do I have any regrets buying an HD gas truck? Now, if you're not one of my regular subscribers, I'll give you a quick background just so you know where I'm coming from. Formerly, over the last decade or so, I've owned HD diesel trucks. And I would use them primarily to tow my RV. I've got a travel trailer behind me before I had a larger fifth wheel. And so for the better part of the last decade, I have been driving HD diesel trucks up until about a year ago. A little over a year ago, I bought this GMC Sierra 2500 HD. It's a 2024, and it has the 6.6 liter gas engine, the L8T with the 10-speed Allison transmission. And so after owning this truck for over a year and towing with it for over a year, do I have any regrets? I used to be all about diesels, but my opinions have changed really over the last few years, and it really comes down to two major factors. And the first is the complexity of modern diesel engines and all the emissions requirements and the extra equipment and components that are put on modern diesel engines. That is a major factor that has changed my opinion. But at the same time, the second major factor is modern gas engines. I mean, they have come a long way, especially in the last few years. I think Ford started it out really by releasing the 7.3 Godzilla, and then GM followed suit with the 6.6 liter L8T. And so modern gas engines have really come a long way, especially in the last few years. And so I'll just start out by naming 5 things that I really like after owning this GMC Sierra 2500 HD with the L8T. And the first one is the lower purchase price, right? I mean, I saved over $10,000 by opting for the gas engine in this HD truck as opposed to going for the Duramax. So obviously saving money is a big factor. I also like that I have lower fuel costs. You know, even though the gas engine is not as efficient, the price of unleaded fuel is cheaper and I don't have DEF. And so typically I'm spending less at the pump now because I'm not paying that premium price for the diesel fuel. So that's a bonus. I would also argue that the gas engine is simpler in terms of maintenance. You know, I don't have fuel filters to change annually, slightly less oil, and goodness, on this L8T, it is so easy to change the oil yourself. I did a video on that. I'll put a card up if you're interested, but I mean, it is a lot easier to maintain than my previous Cummins that I own. I would also say just everyday drivability. I mean, having a gas truck, you can do shorter errands without, worrying about, is that going to clog up the DPF and cause emissions issues? Diesels like to run long and hot. And so I think it's more, suited to just basic everyday drivability. And then fifth, I will say that I do like the exhaust note of a gas truck. I mean, who doesn't like the sound of that, right? But no, seriously, getting back to the question for the video, do I have any regrets buying an HD gas truck? It's a question that I get asked frequently, and I totally get it, because when you're buying a truck, an HD truck, you're spending a lot of money. And it can be very expensive to purchase the wrong truck and then to have to go back and sell it or trade it in. You lose a lot of money then and buy a different truck. And so a lot of folks ask me, do you have any regrets buying a gas truck? And so for the longest time, I've been trying to think about, how do I answer that question? Because for me personally, I don't have any regrets right now with my current situation, but a lot of it has to do with what you're towing, how frequently you're towing, and how long your trips are. And so really, those are the 3 main factors that I've condensed it down to. And I think that a lot of folks out there that are, looking at HD trucks or HD truck owners currently, and they tow something, I think those 3 factors for a lot of people will ultimately be what determines whether they go gas or diesel. Now, if you've seen some of my other videos, then you might know that I like spreadsheets. And so I thought, well, this is the perfect opportunity to make another spreadsheet. And so check out what I've created here. I've created a spreadsheet to help determine whether you should go gas or diesel. And so let me walk you through the different factors of this spreadsheet and then show you how it all plays out. So like I was saying, I've really condensed it down to 3 main factors that tip the scale as to gas versus diesel. So weight is the first one, meaning how heavy am I towing? I mean, right now, my travel trailer behind me, the gross vehicle weight rating of it is just over 6,000 pounds. It's relatively light. You know, before I had a 17,000 pound fifth wheel. That's a significant difference in weight, and I think ultimately that will play into what the average person will want to tow as far as gas or diesel. So underweight, you can see I've got 4 different categories listed here. Under 5,000 pounds, essentially, 5,000 to 10,000, 10,000 to 15,000, and then over 15,000 pounds. And so that's the first category. Then I've got frequency, meaning how frequent am I actually towing per month? Again, 4 categories: once a month, 2 to 3 times per month, 4 to 6 times per month, or 7 times or more per month. And again, my thinking is if you're only towing once a month, but you're towing something extremely heavy, you know, over 15,000 pounds, it may not make a big difference to you, and you may be perfectly content with a gas. At least I would be. But if I'm towing 7 times or more per month, even if it's a lighter trailer, that all plays into the equation, and I might actually prefer diesel. All right, we have a helicopter that appears to be circling my house right now. I'm not sure what's going on. Then the last category is duration, meaning how many hours am I actually towing when I am towing? Am I towing 1 hour or less? You know, 2 to 3 hours at a time, 4 to 5 hours at a time, or even 6 or more hours at a time. And so those are the 3 categories, the 3 factors that I came up with that really help me decide between gas and diesel. And so you'll notice each one has a checkbox in it. And right now I filled this out the way my current situation is right now. Like I said, my travel trailer behind me, it's a little over 6,000 pounds gross vehicle weight rating. And right now, I'm more of a weekend warrior. You know, I'll go camping once a month on the weekends. And so I checked the 1 time per month on the frequency. And then for the duration, most of my trips are local state parks, you know, 1 hour to 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, that sort of thing. And so I put right here 2 to 3 hours and checked that box. Okay, so those are the factors. Then you'll notice over here that I've got my score, and you'll see a 5. What does that mean? Well, if you'll notice above the check boxes on each category, there's a number right there. And so when I check that box, that corresponds to 2 points. Versus if I check this one under weight, 10,000 to 14,999, then it's 4 points, okay? And so those numbers all add up as points across the 3 categories, the 3 factors, and that gives me my total combined score among those factors, okay? Then this next section right here, this is where I'm setting my threshold. When I add up all those points together, I have to determine, okay, what is my threshold? What is the tipping point going from gas to diesel? And so for me personally, I put down 9 here, 9 points. Now, what does that 9 actually mean? Because, I mean, I just made this scale up. Well, let me manipulate some of the different factors here, and then you'll see how that threshold plays out. But ultimately, if my score is under the 9 right here, then gas is where I'm going to settle. These are my numbers personally, by the way. But if I'm at 9 or above 9, then I'm going to go to diesel. So for instance, right now I've got a relatively light travel trailer. But let's just say that I have a fifth wheel that's over 15,000 pounds. So I checked this box right here, over 15,000. That equates to 6 points. And you can see what that does. It bumps my score up to 9. And because my threshold that I set for me personally is 9, then I need to go diesel. You know, I'm only towing once a month in this situation, and I'm towing for 2 to 3 hours at a time. And for me, when I put all those factors together, really diesel is going to suit my needs better. But if I step down on the weight to only 10,000 to 14,999, well, my score drops down to 7. And really in that situation, I'd be perfectly content with a gas truck. But let me reset my sheet here to my current situation with the weight, the frequency, and the duration. So you can see again, my score is 5. I set my threshold at 9, and so I'm content with a gas truck there. But let's say that I have the same travel trailer behind me, gross vehicle weight about 6,000 pounds, but I'm not just towing once a month, I'm stepping it up and I'm towing maybe 4 to 6 times per month. Well, even at that frequency, I'm only towing, 2 to 3 hours at a time. My score's a 7, and so my threshold's a 9. I'm still going to choose a gas truck. But what if my trips are longer? What if I'm driving, 6 hours or more typically, and I'm doing that 2 to 3 times per month? I still have a relatively light trailer. Well, those factors combined would tip the scale, at least for me personally, and cause me to want a diesel HD truck. And so really this spreadsheet, I created it because I think it helps articulate the decision factors between a gas HD truck and a diesel HD truck. And so let me run through some more sample scenarios just to demonstrate the logic behind this spreadsheet. First, I'll go back to my previous situation where I had a fifth wheel with a gross vehicle weight rating of 17,000 pounds. Now, when I owned that fifth wheel, typically I was only towing about once a month. And typically the trips there, sometimes they were 2 to 3 hours, but a lot of times I would take it further, 4 to 5 hours. And so you can see the score, my score jumps to a 10, my threshold was at a 9, and that is why I had a diesel truck. It was a 1-ton dually, and it was best suited for that application. But let's say I had that same fifth wheel, and I was only towing, once a month and less than an hour. So I mean super, super short trips, right? Well, that would put my score at an 8, and really in that case, I would be perfectly okay with a gas truck, assuming that it had the payload, necessary for a fifth wheel of that size. But let's say that you've got maybe something more modest, maybe a fifth wheel in the 12,000 pound range, and so I'm going to check this box right here on the weight. And let's say that you're towing maybe 2 to 3 times a month, and your trips are typically 2 to 3 hours. Well, for me personally, if I envision myself in that situation with a 12,000 pound fifth wheel, towing 2 to 3 times per month and trips that are 2 to 3 hours each, that puts me at a score of 8. That's under my threshold of 9. And so I would be perfectly content with a gas truck. Now, this is my personal threshold that I set right here with the 9. For you, that threshold might be a 7, right? And so in this situation, you might say, really, I think I would be more content with a diesel truck. But for me, really just thinking through all these factors, that 9 is kind of that magic number, that threshold that helps me evaluate between a gas and a diesel truck. Well, let me give you another scenario. Let's just say hypothetically that I decided I wanted to be a hotshot and I was going to tow a relatively light trailer and make deliveries and pick items up, all across the United States. And so let's just say that the trailer was pretty light, under 5,000 pounds, but I'm doing this, just about every day, and most of my trips are going to be, 6 hours per more. And so you can see that bumps my score to a 9. My threshold was a 9, which means I'm going to be happier with a diesel HD truck. Again, because I'm, on the road every day. My trips are longer each day, even though I'm towing relatively light. Now, let me give you one last scenario just to demonstrate how these 3 factors combined play out. Let's say that I've got the same travel trailer behind me, relatively light, 6,000 pounds gross vehicle weight rating there. So I'm going to check the number 2 box. And then let's say hypothetically that I was living full-time in my RV, and when I'm on the road, I'm driving for longer durations, 6 hours or more. Perhaps I'm going from national park to national park, and so I'm driving these long distances, 6 hours or more. Well, that puts my score at a 9. And so even though I've got the same travel trailer behind me that right now I'm using a gas truck, if I was in this situation where I'm towing more frequently and doing longer distances consistently, longer durations, that would push me over to a diesel truck. But then if I revert back to my current situation, keeping the same trailer again, but scaling back on the frequency and the duration, you can see how my score drops back to a 5. And so in that situation with my threshold at a 9, I'm going to choose a gas truck all day long. And so again, I put this spreadsheet together because I've been trying to think about how to explain and how to articulate to folks that ask, do I have any regrets going gas? How can I explain that to them and the factors that went into my specific situation that caused me to go with a gas HD truck as opposed to a diesel HD truck? And really, it's the threshold here that drives the logic behind this sheet. And so for me personally, 9 is my threshold with all these factors combined together. But for you, it might be a lower number. I mean, let's just say that I took the threshold here and made it a 7. Well, in this case, with my current setup, I would still have a gas truck. But if I bump up the weight and went to something over 10,000 pounds, that's going to put me at a 7 with my threshold at 7, and then I'd land in Camp Diesel. And so the point I'm trying to make is really this threshold is a very personal decision. There are some people that would be perfectly content with a gas truck, 15,000 pounds or more, driving frequently just because of the savings involved, right? But then there's other people that would have a much lower threshold and they would opt for diesel with all these factors combined. And so really this spreadsheet is just a visual representation of how those 3 main factors, the weight that you're towing, the frequency, the duration, how those 3 main factors interface with one another and add up to essentially tip the scales between gas and diesel. And so it's really this threshold, this magic number, so to speak, that's going to cause the scale to tip from gas to diesel. And again, that 9 is just my threshold. In fact, do me a favor, if you're watching this, I think it'd be really interesting to get a discussion going. What is your threshold based on these 3 factors, the weight, the frequency, the duration, and the scale that I've created here? What is your threshold that would tip the scales from gas to diesel? Drop a comment below and explain how you arrived at that threshold. And maybe there's some other factors that I haven't listed here that are significant factors for you. Definitely mention all that in the comments below. But going back to the opening question, do I have any regrets? Do I have any regrets going with an HD gas truck, or I should say a modern HD gas truck? And of course, the answer is a big no based on the factors that I shared with you. In fact, even if I were to sell this travel trailer behind me and get something a little bit larger, let's just say maybe I were to get a 12,000 pound fifth wheel, that would bump up my score here, but based on my threshold, I would be perfectly content keeping my HD gas truck here because I'm just not towing very frequently as a weekend warrior and my trips are typically shorter. So again, these are my numbers. So do me a favor and drop your comments below. Do you agree or disagree? Why or why not? Just remember to keep it family friendly and be respectful. As always, thanks for watching.